The Notebook and the Lost Address. Raj Basu. More than a decade ago, in December 2014, I landed in my hometown, Arambagh, for a month. And the first breath felt like opening an old trunk of treasures. Smoke from morning stoves, damp earth after a shy winter sun, the metallic sing of a tea vendor's kettle. My shoes touched the familiar dust, and an old version of me woke up smiling. Every lane remembered my footsteps. Every shopkeeper's nod was a small reunion. I wasn't just visiting. I was being folded back into a place that had shaped my bones. Home gathered around me in waves. Auntie's hug came with a playful scold. Uncle's laughter rolled like a drum. Cousins chatted over each other as if conversation itself had deadlines. And between Auntie's scold and Uncle's laugh, my parents' quiet joy anchored everything. Ma fussing more onto my plate than physics ever demanded. Baba's steady smile lingering like a blessing. At the dining table, steam rose from rice and mustard fish. The clink of plates kept time with stories. We passed memories like dishes. Remember that summer rain? Remember the kite that never came down? Until time slowed politely and let us savor the warmth. I felt that rare, complete ease. Loved without preface, known without explanation. I told my professor at Presidency College in Kolkata I was in town, and their reply came back like a challenge and a welcome. Come give a seminar. Walking through those gates was like stepping into a photograph that still moved. The same chalk scent, the same sun pooling on the steps. The seminar room filled with bright eyes and sharpened pencils. As I spoke, hands shot up, and ideas ricocheted from row to row. It was exhilarating. Equal parts performance, reunion, and discovery. Afterward, students and faculty swept me to a nearby restaurant where steel tumblers sweated on the table. Plates arrived faster than our arguments, and the conversation ran hot as the goat curry. We drifted back to campus for more questions, more laughter. I slipped between groups, one asking about my latest result, another begging stories from my own college days, and felt the old rhythm return. Curiosity, mischief, community. When the light turned honey gold, we ended at the canteen. The tea was perfect. Bold, sweet, just shy of scalding, and the biscuits flaked like they remembered me. I pocketed a couple for the road, waved a dozen goodbyes, and stepped into the evening with that humming fullness only home can give. Lake Town at my uncle's place was the plan for the night, but my heart took its time, strolling through a city that, once again, felt exactly like mine. I stepped off the main road and let College Street pull me by the sleeve. The evening light thinned into the alleys, where books spilled from doorways like quiet tides, and the smell of old paper hung warm and sweet. That's when I saw it. A narrow shop half swallowed by shadow, a glass bell above the door that didn't dare ring. Inside, the world exhaled dust. Shelves leaned like tired men, and spines from another century watched me pass. I wasn't looking for anything. Always the best way to be found. At the back of the shop, a slouching column of notebooks leaned into the shadow. One lay slightly askew, as if it had been set down mid-thought and never reclaimed. I slid it free and felt the surprise first in my palms. A hard-covered volume, thick through the spine, with the broad American proportions I knew from lecture halls in Worcester, not the slimmer sizes that crowd Indian stationery shelves. The cover was scuffed to a velvet dullness. The edges had feathered where years had nibbled them. The pages held a faint, tide-like wave from humidity and time. And there, on the top right corner, precise, almost prim, someone had written RBWPI 1985. My initials, my university, but a year that belonged to someone else. For a breathless instant, the shop seemed to pull back from me, sound receding to a faint bell. I earned my PhD at WPI in 2010. I know exactly how my name looks when I hurry a signature, how my wrist tilts on the final curve of a B. The sight of those letters felt like being tapped on the shoulder by a version of myself that shouldn't exist. Same badge, older time. Coincidence offered an easy exit, but the weight of the notebook argued otherwise. It sat there in my hands with the patience of something that had waited a long while to be recognized. I opened it and felt my stomach tilt. The handwriting wasn't mine, but my muscles believed it was. The slant, the impatient loops, the way an R shrugged into the next word. Every quirk tugged at muscle memory from my PhD years in Worcester. I read. The entries were dense and elegant. Statistical mechanics dovetailed into game theory with the boldness of a good secret. Dates that predated me. Observations I never made. Simulations I never ran. And at the end of certain pages, a neat signature. My initials, my cadence, a ghost tapping its name. A flicker of cold moved up my spine. There's a point where curiosity turns into obligation. I paid the shopkeeper without bargaining and stepped back into the alley as if it might close behind me. The city seemed louder, brighter, a little too awake. I tucked the notebook under my arm, took a long breath to steady the shiver in it, and headed to my uncle's place in Lake Town. That night, the notebook slept on a table by the window. I slept in fragments that never quite fit together. Morning pulled me back to Arambagh, train whistles, family voices, the soft tyranny of errands. The notebook sank into the day's ordinary pockets, and for a few careless hours, I forgot it entirely. Though, now and then, my hand would curl as if remembering how those pages turned. For several days, the notebook sat on Baba's bookshelf. On the day I packed to return to the US, it never crossed my mind. I finished my suitcases. We ate dinner. Noise, steam, everyone talking at once. When I stepped back into my room, the suitcase was shut, and the notebook was lying on top of it, square as a verdict. I stood there, confused. Someone must have found it and set it out for me, I told myself. An ordinary kindness in a crowded house. I didn't ask who. There were too many hands, too many explanations, and I didn't want any of them. I lifted the thick American-sized hardback, felt its familiar weight, and slipped it into the suitcase. The lid closed with a soft, final click. In January, I flew back to the US. Winter lodged in my bones and 2 suitcases at my feet. Somewhere in the dark belly of my luggage, the notebook rode quietly. A modest weight making no claim, at least not yet. I am not a hurried unpacker. A week can pass before a suitcase confesses its last shirt. That first night, blinking through jet lag, I walked into my bedroom and stopped cold. The notebook, that notebook, sat on my desk as if it had been waiting there all along. I hadn't unpacked. I hadn't even unzipped the luggage. Just days after Arambagh's bright, noisy embrace, family chatter, the sweet tyranny of errands that tucked the notebook out of mind. I stood in a winter-lit room in Annapolis before that same notebook, impossibly waiting on my desk, and home's warmth turned, in one breath, into a clear hush of wonder and dread. I stood very still, building a reasonable lie I could live with. Maybe I'd fumbled with the bag and forgotten. Maybe fatigue had edited the memory. The room hummed softly with the heater, and the edges of things seemed too sharp. I turned off the light and let confusion soften into sleep. Morning returned me to habit. I took the notebook to my office at the Naval Academy, tucked it beside a stack of syllabi, and drowned the day in new curricula and half-finished research articles. Only when the building thinned to echoes did I draw the notebook toward me and open it like a door. It wasn't a diary at all. It was a thesis, crisp in its ambition. Statistical mechanics stitched to game theory with audacious care. WPI appeared again and again, a constant in the proofs. If the thesis was real, it should have a record. I searched WPI's online catalog from 1984 through 2000, combing year by year for an RB that matched the voice in my hands. Nothing. The computer screen held its silence. By the time I checked the last entry, the clock read 8:30. By 9, I'd locked the notebook in my cabinet. Metal, key, the small theater of safety, and headed home through a clean, ordinary night. Sometime after midnight, the house woke before I did. A footstep, measured, unhurried, then another. The kind of sound you don't mistake once you've heard it in an empty home. I sat up, heart drumming against the quiet, and the silence thickened around me like felt. Then a single decisive thud, the weighty drop of a hardback on bare wood. I was in the living room before the thought had finished forming. The dark kept its shapes. Furniture held its breath. Near the front door, the notebook lay open on the floor. Pages splayed as if it had been caught mid-syllable. My office was miles away. The cabinet there was locked. Fear slid through me like cold metal. I lifted the notebook, felt its familiar heft, and eased the door to the corridor open. Nothing, only the still air of a sleeping building, the kind that moves past you without witness. I closed the door quietly, careful as a trespasser, suddenly aware that whatever had crossed the threshold tonight might have been me. That was the moment the decision crystallized. No more guessing, no more soothing stories. I would take a few days, go to Worcester, walk back into WPI, and put this thing in front of the people who might recognize it. Whatever this was, mistake, coincidence, haunting, had crossed a line. I was going to cross one back. 2 days later, I was airborne. Baltimore shrinking to a grid of lights. Boston rising out of winter cloud like a clean, bright thought. I grabbed a rental at Logan and pushed west, the highway unspooling, my heartbeat keeping time with the mile markers. Worcester welcomed me with the familiar red brick and wind that always smelled faintly of snow and ambition. At WPI, nods turned into hugs. My PhD advisor, Professor Smith, had a grin that folded years into seconds. The department secretary, Joan, slid me a visitor badge like a secret we still shared. Over lunch, we traded updates. The easy choreography of old colleagues. Then, I asked for a quieter room. I set the notebook on the table. Found it in Kolkata, I said, leaving out the part about footsteps in the night and a locked cabinet that wouldn't hold. Smith and Joan leaned in the way physicists do when a mystery crosses the threshold. Not superstitious, but absolutely attentive. Only a few from 1985 were still around. We made a short list, names like preserved fossils, and I started knocking on doors. When I reached Professor Phillips, silver hair, eyes that missed nothing. He lit up in recognition, wave-warm and steady. We exchanged the ritual pleasantries. Then I slid the notebook across his desk. Something in his face tightened, then went very still. He turned pages with a reverent, careful thumb. Raj Bhattacharya, he said, each syllable wrapped in an American accent that made the name sound newly minted. He didn't need my question. It was already written in the way I was holding my breath. He remembered. A young Bengali who arrived at WPI in 1981, brilliant and stubborn in the best way. The sort of student who argued with equations until they confessed. By late 85, the research was done under the guidance of Professor Phillips. The thesis had begun. In this notebook, always in his bag. He flew back to Kolkata in December to see his parents, planning to return in February to defend. But he never came back. The university wrote, called, wrote, again. Nothing. Eventually, the file lay quiet under dust and other emergencies. I asked for his Kolkata address. Professor Phillips called admissions and I went over. About 30 minutes later, the admissions office secretary handed me a printout of Rajib's application, a scanned copy of his original handwritten form from 1981. The address listed was near Bhawanipur, Kolkata. I left the notebook with Phillips and went back to my hotel, the heater ticking like a slow metronome while a hard Worcester night pressed against the window. I turned on my laptop. On Google Maps, the Kolkata address didn't exist, like the city had blinked and quietly erased it. It was morning in Kolkata by then. I called a friend, explained everything that had happened, and asked if he could go to the Bhawanipur address, just to look around and ask a few questions. I slept in pieces stitched together by bad dreams and the sound of paper turning itself. At dawn in Worcester, dusk in Kolkata, my phone rang. My friend sounded out of breath, as if the city had demanded he hurry, even when he stood still. It was no longer a home. An office block stood there now, glass and steel where lives had once breathed. In December 1985, when Kolkata's new underground metro still felt like a miracle, the tunnel gave way. The ground tore open at the edge of Bhawanipur, and buildings folded like exhausted tents. The city's evening chorus, horns, a tea seller's sing-song, the soft scrape of slippers, learned to pass that corner without pausing, but the air kept a bruise. About 15 were taken in that sudden dark. After the dust and the lawsuits, the plot passed from hand to hand, company to company. The story thinned to paperwork and rumor. The details refused to agree. Only the month stayed unanxious and exact. December. When the call ended, the room felt heavier, as if it too were remembering. I sat with the printout in my lap and the image it conjured, dust hanging in lamplight, a winter afternoon turned sudden night, a notebook in a bag that would never cross an ocean again. It landed like a quiet verdict. Perhaps he and his parents were were in that fall of earth and steel, their plans folded into the city's first underground. Perhaps the world simply lost their address. I thought of letters that were never read, calls that rang into the dark, a thesis caught mid-sentence. And in my hands, all these years later, the only thing still moving was his work, its stubborn paper heart beating across decades to be seen. I went back to Professor Phillips' office and told him everything my friend had uncovered. As I spoke, the light in his face dimmed, his mouth tightened, and his eyes glazed with the kind of grief that arrives late but stays long. When I finished, the room felt smaller, as if the walls themselves understood. Quietly, I asked the question that had been forming ever since I touched those pages. Could WPI award a posthumous doctorate to Rajiv Bhattacharya? The thesis was there, whole, rigorous, alive on paper, even if its author was not. A posthumous doctorate is a doctoral degree awarded after the recipient's death, typically to honor work that was completed or nearly completed, or to recognize exceptional contributions, without conferring the usual ongoing rights or privileges. Phillips looked at me with a sudden, steady intensity. Yes, he said. He would take it to the deans of the school and of students immediately. I thanked him, thanked Smith and Joan, thanked the corridors for remembering our steps, and flew back to Annapolis carrying a strange, solemn hope. A few days later, an email arrived. Approved. The deans had said yes. The university press would typeset the thesis from the notebook and restore it to the formal life it had earned. The thesis would be made available through WPI's online archive. Weeks passed. Then a parcel landed at my door with Worcester's return address. I slit the tape and felt the air change. Inside lay the notebook. A chill climbed my spine, one deliberate rung at a time. Tucked beneath it was a note in Phillips's hand. They had made a copy. The original belonged with me in gratitude for seeing the story through. I slid the notebook onto the shelf beside my own work. That night, sleep stayed just out of reach. I waited for footsteps, for a thud, for the old, inexplicable mischief of pages that moved themselves. Nothing came. The house breathed evenly, as if a promise had finally been kept. Perhaps the notebook had finished its journey. Perhaps the city and its ghosts had, at last, agreed on an ending. I pictured a winter afternoon in Bhawanipur. Steam ghosted from a kettle. 3 pairs of slippers waited by the door. A table was laid for tea until February. Rajiv slid the thick, foreign-sized notebook under his arm. His mother smoothed his scarf with automatic tenderness. His father's palm rested on his shoulder, steady as a vow. Then the earth loosened. The tunnel exhaled a broken breath. The street shuddered. Walls buckled. Facades knelt. Buildings folded like spent tents. In the sudden chalk-white dust and stunned silence, 3 names left the city's mouth together. Mother, father, son. And the city, choking, never spoke them back. No one from that apartment returned. Not the son with the stubborn, beautiful pages. Not the parents who kept a world ready for his knock. They were among the 15 the city counted and then could not call home. The mail came back. The lawsuits crawled. The land changed hands. The story, like the ground, gave way. And yet that notebook traveled on. It crossed years and oceans, carried by chance or mercy, until it found my hands and would not let go. We did what we could. The degree came, too late for the hands that should have held it, but maybe not too late for the work. I like to imagine there was a moment, somewhere beyond anything we can explain, when the news finally reached Rajib and his parents. You did it. We saw you. We remember. Maybe in a room dark for 30 years, a small light flickered on. Maybe, wherever they had gone, his mother's and father's weary hearts eased. Just a little. When I hold the notebook now, the paper carries more than ink. It carries the weight of a meal uneaten, a blessing unspoken, a proud story that ran out of air underground. The notebook rests on my shelf beside my own. When I touch its worn cover, the house holds still, like a chapel when the door opens and winter air strides in. I can't answer why it waited for me in that dim shop, why its handwriting braided so closely with mine, or why the city returned it by such a winding path. I only know that it asked me to carry something home, and I did. If meaning lives anywhere, it lives here, in the small mercy of finishing what was interrupted, in loving a piece of work enough to carry it the last stubborn inches it could not walk alone. The metro beneath Kolkata hums on, steady as a heartbeat that remembers and forgets in the same breath. And in a quiet room an ocean away, the thick notebook rests beside my own, saying everything by keeping still. Maybe that is a circle closing. Maybe it is only the neatest seam we could stitch across a larger tear. Either way, the notebook now answers. By staying where it is, by not moving anymore.